Have you ever wondered why certain women, without raising their voice, without demanding attention, can dismantle the strongest man's ego with nothing more than silence, presence, and restraint? It is not a trick, not manipulation, but an archetypal force, an ancient psychology hidden in the feminine that Carl Jung spoke of when he described the anima and the shadow. Men sense it though they cannot name it. It is the invisible power that unsettles their certainty and strips away the armor they so carefully wear. The first silent weapon is the art of withdrawal, not out of anger, not out of punishment, but out of an unshakable self-respect. When a woman steps back from a man's chaos, when she refuses to feed his ego or engage in his battles, something primal is triggered in him. He is forced into confrontation not with her, but with himself. The noise of his bravado collapses into the silence she leaves behind. Suddenly he must face the shadow he has long avoided, his fear of abandonment, his fear of irrelevance, his fear of not being enough. Jung taught that what we reject in ourselves comes back to us in distorted form, projected outward. A man who cannot bear the quiet of a woman's withdrawal reveals the fractures in his soul. But notice this silence is not passive. It is active energy, sharp as a blade, invisible but undeniable. A man may rage against it, accuse it of cruelty, call it manipulation, yet deep down he knows it is justice. He knows it is the natural mirror he cannot escape. And you, listening now, perhaps have felt this power stirring inside of you. Perhaps you have seen how silence cuts deeper than words ever could. The second weapon is the enigmatic presence of mystery. A woman who resists the compulsion to explain herself, who does not reduce her soul into easy definitions, awakens a man's most obsessive instincts. Mystery, Jung knew, is the language of the unconscious. Men crave certainty, control, a clear narrative they can master, but when confronted with a woman who embodies paradox, who can be both near and far, tender and untouchable, they are drawn into a labyrinth they cannot map. Her mystery activates his anima, the inner feminine within him that he often suppresses. It disorients him, leaves him restless, for he cannot own what he cannot understand. This mystery is not performance. It is not the shallow game of withholding for the sake of drama. It is the deep authenticity of a woman who lives from her center, who chooses not to expose every thought, every wound, every secret. Men are disturbed by this not because she hides, but because she refuses to beg for comprehension. The Stoics knew that mastery lies in self-containment. Seneca wrote that the greatest possession is self-command. When a woman embodies this, she becomes a mirror of his lack of control, and so he both desires and fears her. He will long to unravel her silence, but the more he tries, the deeper he falls into his own confusion. The third weapon, perhaps the most haunting, is detachment. To love without clinging, to give without losing herself, to walk away without bitterness. This is the highest form of power, the one men secretly fear because it reveals the truth they try to bury, that they do not own her, cannot possess her, and will never control the essence of her being. Detachment is liberation disguised as danger. A man senses it in her eyes when she does not beg for his presence, when she does not crumble at his withdrawal. He fears it because it makes him unnecessary to her survival. He realizes she does not orbit his sun, she carries her own. Carl Jung wrote that the greatest burden on a child is the unlived life of the parent. In love, the greatest burden on a man is the unlived life of a woman who sacrifices herself for his validation. But when she refuses that burden, when she detaches, she terrifies him. For she forces him to confront his own inadequacy, to realize he cannot fill the void within himself through her dependency. He must turn inward toward the shadow he fears. And so these weapons, withdrawal, mystery, detachment, are not weapons in the violent sense, but instruments of individuation. They are the forces through which a woman not only protects herself, but also unconsciously guides the man to face his truth. Yet he resists, he fights against them. He calls her cold, distant, unfeeling. He may even leave, hoping to find an easier mirror. But always he remembers. Always he carries the wound of her silence within him. What men fear is not the woman herself, but what she represents, the end of illusion, the crumbling of ego, the confrontation with the unconscious. These silent weapons are not meant to harm, but they cut precisely because they reveal, and in revealing they leave a man forever changed, whether he admits it or not. When silence enters a man's life through a woman, it is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something more ancient, something his bones recognize yet his mind cannot name. It echoes like a cavern, drawing his thoughts back into places he has long sealed away. He will feel it in the pit of his stomach, in the restless turning at night, when his ego crumbles in the dark. Withdrawal is not punishment, it is initiation. It is the quiet ceremony in which his illusions are stripped bare. A woman who withdraws teaches without words, "You will not consume me, you will not define me. I exist beyond the borders of your desire." Jung once wrote that every man carries within him the eternal image of woman, an archetype etched into the soul. Yet when the living woman in his life refuses to bend into that image, refuses to play the role he has scripted, he becomes unsettled. The silent weapon of withdrawal exposes this inner fracture. He realizes he has loved not her, but his projection of her. And when she refuses to play along, when she slips away into the stillness of her own sovereignty, he feels betrayed by a fantasy he himself created. His anger, his begging, his cold indifference, all of it is his struggle against the shadow of his own mind. For some women, this realization is liberating. They see that their power lies not in bending themselves to fit the expectations of men, but in standing firm in their own essence. Imagine a woman who, instead of drowning in arguments, simply retreats into calm. Her silence becomes a mirror too pure for him to tolerate. In that silence, his insecurities scream louder than any words she could throw at him. He feels the loss of control, and with it comes the deeper fear that without her attention, without her emotional labor, he is nothing but a man facing himself. Mystery, the second weapon, deepens this unraveling. A woman of mystery does not hide out of fear, but out of a quiet understanding that her soul is not for everyone's consumption. She knows the difference between intimacy and exposure, between presence and performance. She carries herself like a sacred text, not to be skimmed quickly, but to be studied over time, with patience and reverence. Men conditioned to conquest often mistake her quiet depths for a puzzle to be solved, a lock to be broken, but the truth is more unsettling. There is no solution, no unlocking. The mystery is not a barrier, but her essence itself, and so he obsesses. He cannot stop thinking about what lies beneath her calm. He wonders if her silence means rejection, or worse, indifference. The irony is that his obsession only drives him further into her orbit, even as he fears what he cannot grasp. The Stoics taught that man suffers more in imagination than in reality. In the mystery of a woman, his imagination becomes a storm. He creates stories, doubts, fantasies. She says little, but he hears everything. She remains still, but his mind spins endlessly. This is her unspoken power. Notice how men often chase clarity as though it were oxygen. They demand explanations, reassurance, confessions. Tell me what you mean, tell me how you feel, tell me where we stand. But when a woman does not yield, when she smiles quietly instead of answering, when she offers ambiguity instead of certainty, he feels the weight of his own neediness. Mystery forces him into his own depths. It asks him to sit in uncertainty, to face the truth that control is an illusion. And then comes detachment, the most devastating weapon of all. It does not announce itself with dramatic exits or bitter words. It is quiet, graceful, unshaken. A woman detached does not beg, does not plead, does not cling. She loves perhaps, but her love is not slavery. She gives but never empties herself. She remains but never collapses into his shadow. A man senses this like a chill. He realizes she cannot be held hostage by his approval, his attention, his promises. He fears it because it dismantles the foundation of possession that so much of masculine desire is built upon. Detachment is not indifference. It is power rooted in inner abundance. It says, I want you but I do not need you. I cherish you but I am whole without you. And to a man, this is the most haunting truth. Because deep within his own unconscious lies a boy still searching for validation, still terrified of abandonment. When she detaches, she exposes this child within him. He realizes he cannot bind her with guilt, cannot control her with absence, cannot reduce her into dependency. She is free, and in her freedom he feels his chains. This trinity, withdrawal, mystery, detachment, becomes a silent initiation not only for him but also for her, for she learns through embodying them that her value does not need to be proven, explained or bargained for. She learns that her power lies not in conquest, but in sovereignty. And while men may resist, may fear, may rage, they will never forget. There is a moment every man dreads, though he may never speak of it aloud. The moment he realizes that the woman before him is not bound by his approval, nor undone by his withdrawal. In that instant he confronts something primal, the recognition that her essence is beyond his grasp. Withdrawal strips away his illusions, mystery denies him mastery, and detachment reminds him of her wholeness. Together they dismantle the very scaffolding of his ego. What he fears most is not losing her, but losing the reflection of himself he once found in her gaze. Without that reflection, he is forced into the silence of his own being. A woman who wields these silent weapons does not do so with malice. She does not strike to wound, she simply refuses to abandon herself. And yet to a man unprepared for such truth, this refusal feels like betrayal. It unravels him. Jung would say that he projected his anima onto her, casting his inner feminine onto the canvas of her presence. But when she resists becoming the character he designed, when she insists on being whole in herself, the projection collapses. He must now face what he once avoided, the fragmented unlived parts of his own soul. Some men run from this confrontation, searching for women who will mirror back their illusions. Others, though wounded, awaken. They see that the silence of a woman is not emptiness but invitation. It is an initiation into shadow work, into the confrontation of their ego, into the possibility of individuation. The Stoics wrote that suffering is the teacher of the wise. So too is the silence of a woman a teacher for the man willing to listen. But few listen, most resist. Consider the way detachment terrifies him most of all. When she walks away without anger, when she closes the door without shouting, when she loves him but refuses to cling, he realizes something devastating. He has no power over her. And power for many men is the axis on which love has been confused with possession. They fear the woman who does not collapse in their absence, because it forces them to see the hollowness of their own presence. Mystery likewise keeps him awake at night. What does she think? What does she feel? Why does she not explain herself? In truth, she owes no explanation, but his mind demands one. He feels entitled to clarity, to the decoding of her essence, yet she remains composed still, unhurried. This is not cruelty, it is the embodiment of the eternal feminine, the side of the psyche, Jung described as the anima, fluid, elusive, never fully known. Men want to capture it, contain it, define it. But once defined it vanishes, once contained it slips through their grasp. Withdrawal is the beginning of this initiation, the first shock to his ego. It is the moment she steps back, not in weakness, but in quiet defiance of his need for dominance. He senses it like a fracture in the air. Suddenly the energy he fed on disappears. His anger flares because his reflection is gone. She no longer plays the role of mirror to his power. Instead she mirrors only his emptiness, and that emptiness is unbearable. What a man secretly fears, though he may never admit, is that a woman who embodies these silent weapons is not fighting him at all. She is not engaged in his war. She has transcended it. He is wrestling shadows while she is standing still. He strikes at illusions while she lives in freedom. This asymmetry unbalances him. He feels powerless, and in that powerlessness, he touches the edge of despair. And yet the paradox is this: what terrifies him also draws him closer. He is magnetized by what he cannot conquer. The very silence that unsettles him becomes the silence he cannot live without. The mystery that torments him becomes the mystery he worships. The detachment that wounds him becomes the freedom he secretly craves for himself. He both fears and desires her power. She becomes the embodiment of his own unconscious longing, to be free, to be whole, to be unbound. This is why he remembers her. Long after she is gone, long after his pride dismisses her, long after his ego reconstructs its armor, he remembers. He remembers her silence, the way it exposed his weakness. He remembers her mystery, the way it awakened his obsession. He remembers her detachment, the way it reminded him that love is not possession, and in remembering he carries her like a ghost. She lives in the shadow of his memory, not because she clung, but because she let go. For the woman, this is the true essence of empowerment, not dominance, not conquest, but sovereignty. She does not need to control him, for she controls herself. She does not need to demand his respect, for she embodies it. She does not need to win his devotion, for her presence alone inspires it. Her power is not loud, it is not theatrical, it is silent, and therefore unshakable. Most women are taught from an early age to believe that their power lies in pleasing, in explaining, in softening the edges of their truth, so that men may feel secure. Yet Jung would remind us that suppression of the true self only deepens the shadow. A woman who hides her silence, who surrenders her mystery, who abandons her detachment, becomes not herself but a mask, a persona shaped for the comfort of others. And masks always fracture, they crack under the weight of unmet needs, unspoken truths, and unseen wounds. The woman who dares to drop that mask steps into something terrifying, both for her and for the man who beholds her. She becomes an archetype, the untamed feminine, the soul unowned. Her presence awakens ancient memory, the same energy that stirred mythologies, that inspired poetry, that destroyed kingdoms. Men throughout history have feared and revered this power, often seeking to control it, to reduce it, to bind it in roles. Yet every attempt fails, for what is archetypal cannot be caged. This is why silence unsettles him so deeply. Words can be debated, argued, dismissed, but silence cannot be controlled. It is a mirror that reflects only what he brings into it. If he brings insecurity, he hears rejection. If he brings arrogance, he hears dismissal. If he brings longing, he hears possibility. Silence makes him confront himself, and that confrontation is unbearable to an ego that survives on external validation. He may accuse her of cruelty, but what he truly resents is the confrontation with his own unhealed wounds. Mystery operates in the same realm. A woman who refuses to reveal everything at once, who keeps her depths sacred, awakens a man's unconscious obsession. He circles her like a planet around a star, seeking light, seeking clarity, yet never reaching the core. This orbit is both intoxicating and maddening. Jung would call this the pull of the anima, the feminine within his psyche demanding recognition. He does not simply desire her, he desires the parts of himself she awakens. She becomes a key, though she never promised to open his locks. And detachment, the final and most devastating of the silent weapons, is the completion of her sovereignty. When she no longer fears his absence, when she no longer collapses under his silence, when she no longer bargains for his love, she becomes untouchable, not in the sense that she does not feel, but in the sense that she cannot be possessed. He fears this because his unconscious has long equated love with ownership. To see love exist without need, to see devotion exist without chains, is to realize that everything he believed about control was a lie. This is why the strongest men often fall hardest for the women they cannot control. It is not weakness that undoes them, but the reflection of their own shadow. In her silence, they see their fear. In her mystery, they see their incompleteness. In her detachment, they see their dependence. And while this realization terrifies them, it also offers them the rarest of gifts, the possibility of transformation. But transformation demands surrender, and most men resist. They would rather chase another mirror, another woman who will reflect their illusions, than confront the depths stirred by the one who refuses. Yet the wound remains. He carries her absence like a scar. He remembers her silence in the quiet moments. He dreams of her mystery in restless nights. He feels her detachment every time he fears being left again. She becomes his unspoken teacher, though he may curse her name. For the woman, understanding this truth is liberation. She does not need to fear that her silence makes her cold. She does not need to fear that her mystery makes her difficult. She does not need to fear that her detachment makes her unloving. These are not flaws, they are the very weapons that preserve her soul. They are not about punishing men, but about protecting herself, about refusing to collapse into the demands of others. And so she learns to embody them not with bitterness, but with grace. Her silence is not walls, but boundaries. Her mystery is not deceit, but dignity. Her detachment is not cruelty, but freedom. In embodying these, she becomes not only untouchable to men who would misuse her, but magnetic to those rare men willing to meet her as she is whole, sovereign, unowned. This perhaps is the deepest irony. What men secretly fear most, is also what they most deeply crave. They long for a woman who will not collapse, who will not become an echo, who will not lose herself in their shadow. For in her strength, they see the possibility of their own. In her silence, they find truth. In her mystery, they find longing. In her detachment, they find freedom. And though many resist, those who awaken know this: a woman who embodies these silent weapons does not destroy a man, she awakens him. Some women awaken to their power only after heartbreak, after giving too much of themselves away, and realizing the emptiness that follows. They remember the nights of begging to be heard, word, of over-explaining to a man who had already stopped listening, of trying to prove worth to someone who measured them in fragments. That is when the silence is born, not as weakness, but as wisdom. The silence becomes a reclamation of energy, a refusal to spend life force where it is not honored, and this is the first step into sovereignty, the threshold that transforms pain into power. Men, however, are rarely prepared for this transformation. They grow accustomed to women who give endlessly, who soothe, who nurture even in the face of neglect. So when a woman chooses stillness, when she no longer reacts, when she allows his words to echo unanswered, he feels destabilized. Jung wrote that the greatest fear of the ego is annihilation. In her silence, he tastes that annihilation, for without her emotional labor, without her constant reassurance, his ego cannot sustain itself. He begins to unravel, though outwardly he may mask it with indifference, or bravado. Mystery, too, rises most vividly after heartbreak. A woman who has been consumed once before, learns the sacredness of her inner life. She no longer scatters her secrets like pearls, before those who cannot see their value. Instead she holds herself with quiet dignity, revealing only to those who prove worthy. This restraint is not a game, it is protection. Men sense this instinctively, and it unsettles them. They are used to easy access, to quick answers, to transparency given on demand. When confronted with a woman who keeps her depths hidden, they feel both fascination and fear. The fascination comes from desire, the need to discover, to decode, to conquer. The fear comes from inadequacy, the suspicion that they may never be enough to truly touch her, and so they circle her endlessly, trapped between longing and intimidation. Mystery forces them into a kind of psychological tension that is both addictive and tormenting. It is the very tension that stirs obsession. Detachment, however, is where the true terror lies. Imagine a woman who can love fully, yet remain unbroken if love is withdrawn. She can give tenderness, passion, devotion, but she does not tether her soul to whether he stays or leaves. Her heart may ache, but she will not collapse. She knows she belongs first to herself. To a man, this kind of woman is both a dream and a nightmare. A dream because her love is free of desperation, a nightmare because he realizes she will never need him in the way his ego demands. The Stoics would call this the highest form of freedom, to love without dependency, to connect without possession. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that nothing belongs to us, not even the people we cherish. A woman who embodies detachment has absorbed this truth into her bones. She does not fight to hold what slips away, for she knows that what is real cannot be taken, and what is taken was never real. Her presence radiates an ease that unsettles men who are used to being clung to, begged for, worshipped. And yet the paradox remains: the more she detaches, the more unforgettable she becomes. Men may leave her, but they never escape her. Her silence lingers like a haunting melody. Her mystery becomes the riddle they cannot solve. Her detachment burns into their memory, a reminder that love does not always equal possession. He may run to other women, seeking to soothe the wound, but deep down he knows none can replicate the presence of the one who walked away whole. For the woman, this realization is not arrogance, but awakening. She no longer sees herself as powerless in love. She recognizes that her essence is not diminished by rejection, nor is her value proven by devotion. She carries her worth within, untouchable, eternal. This is the foundation of feminine sovereignty, the recognition that love is an offering, not a surrender, that to give does not mean to lose, that to remain detached is not to be cold, but to be free. And freedom is the ultimate shadow men fear in women, because freedom means they cannot control, cannot own, cannot mold. Freedom means she can love deeply and still walk away if disrespected. Freedom means her soul answers to something higher than his approval, and in that realization, he trembles, not because she is cruel, but because she is untouchable. The three silent weapons, withdrawal, mystery and detachment, are not techniques but states of being. They emerge naturally when a woman knows herself, when she has walked through fire, and refuses to burn again. They are the essence of a feminine power, so old, so primal, that no man can fully conquer it. They are what every man secretly fears, and yet what every man secretly longs for: the presence of a woman who is whole, sovereign and free. The woman who embodies them does not need to fight for her worth. She does not need to prove herself in noise. Her silence is enough. Her mystery is enough. Her mystery is enough. Her detachment is enough. She is enough.